Thank you, Donald. Good evening, everybody. Within the last hour, it's been confirmed we have the first death in the United Kingdom from coronavirus. This occurred in the Royal Berkshire Hospital in Reading. It was, we're told, an older patient with previous underlying medical conditions. And all of this just 3 days after Boris Johnson gives a press conference to say we're in the containment phase of the coronavirus crisis. We are already in stage 2. We're already in the delay phase, and England's Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, spoke on the delay phase this morning.
I would say we've moved from a situation where we were mainly in contain with some delay built in to we're now basically mainly delay, but we're maintaining
so
some
mainly
of the
in the second stage.
Mainly in the second stage at this point in time.
So that's a very quick move, isn't it? He then went on to say they have to balance the economic disruption with the impact it would have on the virus.
It is very easy to both choose a package of measures which is quite dramatic but has relatively little impact on the epidemic, and we're very keen to avoid that. So we're modelling out all the combinations we can because people's livelihoods do depend on this, and also timing. So there will be quite a long period between knowing that we've got an epidemic running at a reasonable rate and the actual peak. And what we're very keen to do is not intervene till the point we absolutely have to, so as to minimise the economic and social disruption on people, and then of course to stop it again as soon as we can afterwards. And so it's both the combination of what we need to do, and we might in later questions we might want to go into some of the details, things we could do, but also the timing. The timing is critical.
Well, he's talking there about economic disruption, and of course flights are very much a part of that, and I have to say I've got some questions to ask about the government's policy on flights into this country from very high-risk areas. We also spoke earlier on, before we came on air, to Dr. Derek Gatherer, a virologist from Lancaster University, and this is what he had to say about the delay stage.
Basically, you have to get people to observe the hygiene rules as much as they can so that the number of transmission events is kept to an absolute minimum. So that's all this business about keeping your hands as clean as possible, catching sneezes, not shaking hands perhaps, keeping a distance from people when you're talking to them. Those kind of things, they're not 100% effective, of course, but they do help to just bring down the number of transmissions, and every transmission that doesn't happen is a step towards bringing the epidemic under control. It seems that the virus binds to a receptor, which is a protein which is inside your respiratory tract. So this is in the throat, in the upper part of the lungs, and so consequently you would have to actually get the virus into your mouth. So when it's on your hands, it won't be absorbed through your skin. And that's why hand washing is one of the sort of major recommended things that we need to do in order to prevent the virus from getting into our mouths and nose. But once it's in the mouth and nose, then it has a decent chance of binding to this receptor on the surface of the airways, and then getting entry to the body, and an infection will start.
And we asked Dr. Gatherer about banning flights from high-risk areas.
Well, actually, the WHO now has the UK on that same list of areas. In fact, so people that are coming into the UK are travelling from one high-risk area into something which is already on the same list. So I think we're actually past the stage now where we can do anything really by restricting travel. There's no doubt that in Wuhan, the Chinese did really keep the lid on things for quite a long time with what they did there, and that's a perfect example of what a delay phase would look like. So we'll probably be attempting to do something similar here, and obviously not quite as drastic as what they did in China, but the idea is simply to slow the progress of the thing down. That frees up hospital beds, it makes it easier, gives us more time to deal with it, and so on. The majority of new cases that we'll see in the UK now will be cases that are spreading within the UK. So we've got ongoing transmission at the moment. So the number of cases that will come in from abroad, which was always small anyway. I mean, probably the UK outbreak was seeded by a small handful of people arriving from Italy, in all likelihood, possibly some that were coming from further afield, but most of the new cases we'll be seeing are ones that will be as a result of the epidemic that's now ongoing here.
Well, the argument there is there's no point stopping flights coming in from high-risk areas because the horse has bolted already. That's kind of what's being said. And, he's absolutely right. The World Health Organization do not seem to think that stopping flights is really relevant. And, of course, now has the UK on its list as well. But I don't know. I'm just looking here at the flight schedules this morning coming into London Heathrow. Flight in from Tehran. Flight in from Tokyo, flight in from Milan, flight in from Osaka, flight in from Rome, flight in from Hong Kong. So on the one hand, we're told by the government that 1 in 5 of us could finish up not working. We're told by the government that up to 80% of the country could catch this. We know that the absolute cause to begin with was air travel, and as the doctor just said then, almost certainly it was air travel from Italy that started the problem in this country. So we're given all these warnings about what we have to do and what may happen, and yet we're still allowing flights to come into this country from Tehran, northern Italy, Japan, Hong Kong. We don't check medically a single person unless they appear very obviously to have symptoms. We don't check a single person, and I'm putting it to you folks, I think that there is, and I don't care what the World Health Organization say or doctors have to say. I think there is a huge inconsistency here in what the government says and what the government has done. And bear in mind that back in January, President Trump stopped flights from China or people who'd been to China from coming into the US, and if they did as citizens, they went straight into a quarantine procedure. The Australians, similarly, put travel restrictions on very, very quickly, and we still haven't done it, despite the fact we've moved just in 3 days from containment to delay, and we're told that 80% of us might catch it. Now, we could, of course, just give up, I suppose, and say, why bother? But if we have a problem already, why in goodness name would we wish to add to it? So I'm asking you, do you agree with me? Should we have stopped flights earlier coming into this country from high-risk areas? 0345 6060 973. I think we should have done. You can tell me I'm right or tell me I am wrong. Gags is a new caller to me from Feltham. Good evening to you.
Hi, Nigel, you all right?
I'm all right. So Heathrow Airport, just down the road from you, of course.
It is indeed, yeah. So unfortunately, I don't agree with you, actually.
That's all right. It's a free country.
Yeah, fair enough. So just because based on the statistics, actually, so if we look at places such as America and Italy who have cancelled the flight, their death toll actually is higher than ours. So just Googling numbers a little while ago, I saw that actually America has got maybe, I think it's 11 deaths at the moment, and they have stopped the flight. Particularly with the information that we've got today with regards to like Flybe and different airlines that are having trouble. Obviously, as you said,
well, that's a different issue, though, isn't it? I mean, that is an airline company in trouble already, who have seen at least a 40% decline in bookings. It's a slightly different issue. Look, Gags, I'm not convinced by this. It seems to me, however bad the outbreak is in America or here or Australia or anywhere else, does it make sense to you that just 3 or 4 miles from where you live, there were people today getting off an aeroplane from Hong Kong and we weren't doing medical checks or quarantine procedures on any of them? Does that actually make sense given where we are?
I think there are medical checks available, not straight off the flight, as you're saying.
That's not the point.
But actually, obviously, what is happening with all the information that we're getting from Public Health England and advisors and stuff, and actually, if we look at the numbers, that we only have the one, whereas if, as we look at your friend Donald Trump has done and stopped the flight, he seems to have, or the Americans seem to have a lot more deaths than we do, despite the fact that they've stopped the flights. I
think to compare statistics of outbreak numbers or those that have died from it at this stage is premature. We may have a better view in a couple of weeks of where we are. But all right, look, I'm not pretending my solution is perfect, but it does seem to me the government's approach is inconsistent. Thank you for your call. Going to Edinburgh to speak to Alice. Alice, good evening to you.
Good evening, Nigel.
Welcome. So what do you think? Should we have stopped these flights?
Oh, yeah. I think we should have done it a long time ago.
So do I. And why haven't we?
I think there are a few reasons. Probably, I think here in Europe, people are quite relaxed about these things. When we are sick, we go to the GP and they just tell us to go home and take some, rest and drink some hot water, and that's all. I think that kind of relaxed attitude perhaps is not very applicable to this coronavirus.
Alice, I agree with you. I think we're lax in the extreme, and it isn't even just where people are flying in from. It's where they've been in the preceding 2 weeks as well, isn't it?
Exactly. And we don't know who are the carriers, to be honest. And so I'm in Edinburgh, although there haven't been, people diagnosed. But I think there are a lot of carriers walking around. And that's quite frightening because I'm a new mother and my husband works in a university and a lot of people are sick. I know this is the flu season.
Of course.
People are coughing. But I think we should just, really treat it much more seriously.
Yep.
Look what China did. A lot of financial cost, economic cost has to be sacrificed for the, quote unquote, greater good, in my opinion. For example, many things could be done on the internet, and people are wearing masks these days. I know there's been a lot of racial discrimination towards Asian people wearing masks, but this is different from, other situations. We're protecting ourselves. Which means
Alice, the first duty of government is to protect its citizens. And I suggest when we discovered that there was this virus that was coming into the country through air travel, we should have acted a damn sight more quickly. And you're quite right. If that means there is an economic cost, well, do you know what? There's an economic cost anyway. Alice, thank you for your call. Mark in Sunderland says, yep, we should have stopped flights from China and other countries. Tony says, all incoming passengers to the UK should be screened pre-flight and post-flight upon arrival, temperatures, etc. Tony, I've said it all this week. I landed at 6 o'clock this morning on Sunday morning in Heathrow Airport. There was a mass of humanity coming in at that time, as just after the runways are open, coming from all over the world, and no checks, no tests of any kind at all. I think we're being, on the one hand, the government's saying it's going to be a disaster, 80% of you are going to get it, and on the other, but we're not actually going to bother to do very much about it. Just wash your hands and it'll all be fine. This is the Nigel Farage Show, LBC 6:15, time for the news headline. Before we get back to coronavirus and the spreading crisis around the world and the fact that I really think it's rather inconsistent with the government to tell us that most of us are going to get this, but they're not stopping flights coming in from very high-risk areas, a couple of pieces of European news. We've just finished the first 4 days of negotiations between the new UK team and Michel Barnier. And Barnier has said there are many serious divergences. Well, we kind of knew that, and that's where the negotiation starts. He then went on to say that the United Kingdom should respect the European Union's independence. But I was told by everybody it was just a loose association of sovereign states. Proof, if ever it was needed, that the EU is a nation, it is a country. I thought that was a very, very telling line. And a brilliant tweet put out by Mark Stone from Sky News, who said this today. Only a few years ago, most EU leaders scolded their fellow Hungarian leader Viktor Orban for building walls and firing gas at migrants attempting to break in. Today, rather than having spent 5 years coming together to solve the problem, they're backing Greece for doing exactly the same as Viktor Orban. And I do remember a very famous photograph of people trying to get into the European Union. I may have even put it on a poster once and been condemned for it. Now, everything has changed. Everything in politics in Europe has changed. Breaking news, Italian coronavirus deaths have now jumped to 148 as confirmed cases climb to 3,858. And California has declared a state of emergency after announcing its first coronavirus death, bringing the US total up to, as a caller said earlier, 11 people. Should the government have acted more quickly? Warren says, why don't cabin crews scan people mid-flight instead of flogging them cups of coffee? Well, OK, that's a thought. And Ollie from Basingstoke says, the trouble is, we're monitoring. You don't know where people have been before the flight they get on. Yeah, Ollie, that's what you need to do, proper screening. And that's why the Trump travel restriction was anybody that had been to China within the last couple of weeks, not just the flight they were on at that moment in time. Peter is a new caller from Barnet. Peter, good evening.
Nigel, good evening. And before I answer your question, I'd like to thank you for everything you've done so far for Brexit, and hope it goes our way.
Well, that's very, very sweet of you, Peter, but isn't it funny? You know, politics never stands still, and we're now facing a global crisis that might dominate the next 6 months.
Yes, and you do have to question the World Health Organization, which only a couple of days ago congratulated China on how well they did, even though they lied to the world and to everybody. And yes, I mean, we still have people coming.
Peter, they're globalists. The World Health Organization, they are globalists. And you know, these are the kind of people that support free movement, so it's perhaps not surprising they're saying what they're saying, but these circumstances are different.
They are, and we should be stopping everyone from coming. And in fact, anybody that comes we should make them declare it, and at risk of financial penalties and possibly prison if they lie, like immigration in the US. If they've been in any of the affected territories, they should go straight to a quarantine from within Heathrow and not leave until 14 days, or be turned back by the airline straight away.
And should we have done this earlier, Peter? Should this have happened a week or two back?
Nigel, not a week or two ago back, when we heard news about, despite China reassuring us, but they were building hospitals in 5 days,
yeah,
which they never did beforehand.
They knew.
That should have been a warning signal.
Yeah. So really, the government's been a bit flat-footed, Peter.
Well, not only that, you know, and raises another question, Nigel. All those civil servants and specialist experts who have advised the government based on which they've made the decisions, are they going to take the blame and are they going to leave, or is it going to be again some other
nobody
ever
nobody ever takes the blame, Peter, honestly. Peter, I've got to love you and leave you because Boris Johnson has just been speaking in Downing Street and was asked for his reaction to the first death in the United Kingdom of somebody from coronavirus.
Well, obviously, our sympathies are very much with the victim and their family. But the situation is pretty much as it has been, in the sense that we're still, Sam, in the contained phase. Though now our scientists and medical advisors are making preparations for the delay phase. And so what they're looking at in the next few days, in the near future, is what kind of measures might be necessary to retard the spread of the disease. As soon as they've decided that the moment is right to announce those, I'll make sure we will be absolutely clear with the public about what needs to be done. But for the moment, things are as they have been, and you know I'm going to say this, the best single thing we can do is wash our hands, 2 verses of the national anthem, or happy birthday, hot water, bar of soap.
The number of people with the condition is over 100. Are you really saying people shouldn't change their behaviour beyond just washing their hands? We've been waiting for the government to change its, as it were, status, the level of this condition. Right. We seem to be quite cautious about doing that. Are you too worried about making people nervous about this condition?
No, I mean, literally, that's the right thing to do at present, given where we are in the epidemiological progress. You know, I tell you why. It's because in something like this, what the scientists say is that you've got a range of things that you can do to arrest or check the spread of a disease, but you can't fire your shots too early. It's all about the timing and the progression. And so they're thinking very carefully about when that next suite of measures, those next options are used. And one thing I'm absolutely sure we will be telling everybody as soon as we get that medical advice.
Finally, but just for today, people are to keep the same travel plans, the same work plans, the same school plans as they did last week and the week before?
Obviously, there's been a change of advice on Italy, I believe, but basically we're saying wash your hands and business as usual. We're still in the contain phase. Obviously, we're looking at the preparations we need to make now for delay.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. So the Prime Minister says it's all about timing. Absolutely right, Prime Minister. You just said in that statement in Downing Street a few minutes ago, we're still in the contain phase. We're not. The government's chief medical officer says we've moved to the delay phase. Boris, I think, is just playing catch-up with this. We're not taking any lead at all, and that includes, in my opinion, air travel. Fiorella says to me on Facebook, I flew into Singapore, where everyone had their temperature taken before being allowed in. That's the very least we should have done. I agree with you. I'm going to Ipswich to speak to Leslie. Leslie, good evening to you.
Good evening to you, Nigel.
Welcome.
How are you?
Your new caller, welcome. I'm fine. Leslie, I've just listened to the Prime Minister, and he is behind the curve on this.
Well, maybe a little bit in what he said in terms of we're not in containment anymore, but your question being, should we stop flights into the UK from high-risk areas?
Yes.
It would cause chaos, Nigel. I mean, just for a moment, let's consider what are high-risk areas. What do you consider to be a high-risk area?
Northern Italy.
Northern Italy, yes.
Iran,
China.
Hong Kong and China.
Stop. Why Hong Kong? Why is Hong Kong any riskier than Germany?
Actually, statistically, it probably isn't.
It isn't, exactly.
But I'm certain that Leslie, I'm certain Northern Italy is. I'm certain Iran is. All right.
Yes.
I'm struck we've done nothing. I'm struck there are no health checks at Heathrow. I'm struck we're behind the curve and playing catch up. Leslie, let me say this to you. You say if we did this, it would cause chaos. I'll tell you what
yes, because it's not just passenger travel, it's air freight. Every single flight that comes into this country is carrying a huge amount of freight as well. There would be mass shortages of everything, including medication. If we start to say, right, we're not going to accept flights from any country that has more than 100 cases identified of COVID-19, we would have no flights from Singapore, America, Spain, Japan, France, Germany. I agree there should be screening from high-risk countries.
There'll be more chaos, Leslie.
Italy.
There'll be more chaos if vast numbers of people catch this directly as a result of air travel, and we're now pretty certain that it's air travel from Italy that brought this problem to us.
People have travelled from Italy. The majority of people do travel by air. But it isn't to say that it can't come into the country on ferries, on trains, on the Eurostar, from Paris, from Brussels.
It's possible.
You cannot shut your borders to contain an invisible virus. It's here. It's now here. There is communication between people.
All right, so let's get flights. All right, Leslie, let's get flights to Wuhan going again, shall we? Why not?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Well, it is.
I agree with you.
It is.
That we should. No, that's not what I've said. I've said that you need to look specifically at where these high-risk areas are. And you've named Hong Kong as being one of those. And I think that's actually unfair. And I think that's scaremongering, Nigel.
Well, I think we should have stopped flights from China a lot earlier than we did. Hong Kong is part of China, but Hong Kong itself does not have the kind of problems that Wuhan and other places do. I accept that, Leslie, but my general point is we appear on the one hand to be telling everybody we're all going to get it, and on the other, doing almost nothing to try and stop the flow of spreaders coming into the country. And that's what annoys me.
Your general point is valid, but I do feel that we need to be very careful that if we generalise, we're not then causing panic and scare that will prevent people from going about their normal business.
All right, no, it's a fair point. I get it. Leslie, thank you. Argue with great passion. This is the Nigel Farage Show. It is now 6:30. Time for the news. With government's not doing enough, we're still allowing aeroplanes in from high-risk areas. We're doing no health checks at all at the airport unless we see somebody's in obvious distress. And this, of course, on the day when we learnt this morning that Flybe has collapsed. Now, to be fair, the company was in some deep financial trouble already. But, you know, the last two nights, phone-ins, I've asked you about your business, what's happening to you, and we've had people ringing in who've lost their jobs, lost contracts, and this is 2,000 people at Flybe who've lost their jobs. And the consequences of this for airports like Southampton are pretty devastating. I would imagine, tourist-wise, places like Jersey and Guernsey will be extremely worried about this. And, of course, there's always a debate in these situations. Should the government step in? Now, up until now, pre-Brexit, the government really couldn't step in because of EU state aid rules. I think now it probably could step in, but if government pumps money in, is that really the answer? Or do we allow the market to sort it out? Is someone like Ryanair going to come in and make these flights work? And you know, my guess is, as somebody that's used Flybe quite a bit, flying down to Cornwall, Channel Islands, wherever I've been. You know, I think if it's a well-run company, I think something will take its place. But I'm not happy with the government. I really do think that Boris Johnson clip we listened to a few minutes ago shows he still thinks we're in containment when we're not. We've moved on to the next stage, and we're playing catch-up. We should have done a lot more. Mosh says to me, everyone who comes into the UK should have medicals. Sarah makes the point that Scott Morrison has been very good on containing the virus. Scott Morrison is the Prime Minister of Australia, and yeah, they have acted very rapidly. Jackie can't believe these flights are still allowed. Steph says, my uncle flew back from Thailand via China 2 weeks ago, and no one was there at customs. It was empty. I mean, this is lax. This is dangerous. This is why we've got the problem that we've got. Yeah, I know other parts of the world have got it, but goodness me, surely you try to do your best. All the Prime Minister tells us is, wash our hands. Great. Let's go to Luca, who's a new caller from Greenwich. Good evening to you.
Hi, Nigel. Hi.
Welcome.
Sorry about my English in first place, but I'm talking about my personal situation.
Yes.
As an example. I'm due to leave on the 8th of March, on Sunday, because I've got a ski trip booked in northern Italy.
Right.
So, because of the government not advising against unnecessary travel to northern Italy, the travel company is still allowed to run ski holidays in that area.
Man,
and they're not offering any refund or partial refund or amendment if you cancel. So you're going to lose your money.
Yes.
And then what's going to happen? People, instead of losing their money or the one holiday, we keep going there from England, from UK, coming back here with the virus and infecting everyone. So I don't see the government doing enough about it.
It's a very, very good example you've just given. And tell me, have you tried to cancel your reservation?
Yes. I keep calling everyone, the insurance, travel insurance,
yes.
The company. I don't know if I can name the company.
I'd rather you didn't right now, to be honest with you.
Okay. But I keep calling the company, and they keep saying to me that according to the government, it's still safe to travel to northern Italy, to fly there for, holidays,
yes.
ski holidays,
yes.
ski trips. And so I'll be all right. I can fly there with my 1-year child, come back to London, and then let's see. Oh, by the way, the nursery employer, they said to me that if I go to northern Italy, I will be subject to quarantine. So when I'm back here, me and my family, we have to stay home for 14 days.
Well,
they wouldn't accept me at work, and they wouldn't accept my child.
So you're just...
What if I don't say anything to anyone?
So Luca,
my child will go back to the nursery. I'm coming back to work with a virus.
No, don't do that.
I'm going to spread... No. I'm going to cancel 100%, even if I'm going to lose my money. And the one holiday I had in 1 year... but I'm not crazy. I'm not going to take my child to Italy. But
well, I tell you what, it's a very, very powerful phone call, Luca, and thank you for coming on and sharing that with us. Isn't that mad? We're completely mad. We're still encouraging people to go to northern Italy skiing. Does that make sense given where we are? I don't think it does. Does the Prime Minister know what he's doing? Is he actually in control? Let's listen to Chief Medical Officer Professor Chris Whitty talking about the fact we've moved on to the delay stage.
I would say we've moved from a situation where we were mainly in contain with some delay built in to we're now basically mainly delay.
Right.
But we're maintaining some of the elements.
in the second stage.
Mainly in the second stage at this point in time.
OK, and here's Boris Johnson 20 minutes ago.
But the situation is pretty much as it has been, in the sense that we're still, Sam, in the contained phase.
No, we're not. I mean, what is going on? What's happening? I mean, whether you agree or not with what Scott Morrison in Australia has done or Donald Trump in America has done, at least they seem to have some grip on what's going on. I really do think that is absolutely extraordinary that just half an hour ago, 20 minutes, half an hour ago, that's what the Prime Minister said. Quite astonishing. Maybe that's why we're not doing enough. Matt is a new caller from Streatham. Good evening, Matt.
Hi, good evening. Nigel, nice to talk to you.
Good to talk to you.
I'm really, I disagree with many things, but at this one point, I totally agree with you. And to be honest, had you not had a negligent Prime Minister who lies through his teeth, would have been in a situation we're at now at the moment. He's still telling people that simply wash your hand and you'll be fine.
I know.
What is day by day spreading, and we'll be in a situation, that it will become an epidemic, and then the government will have no choice. Because the NHS, he said to us that the NHS is fully ready. 8 out of 150 doctors said they're not ready. So I don't understand where they get this steps from. And, I mean, unless there's a hidden agenda for the elderly people really to die. I'm really worried about the people in the healthcare. People in the healthcare, what would happen to them, especially they're the most vulnerable people? And look at...
You could say, Matt, that one of the reasons the Prime Minister... I'm trying to defend him for a moment now, at least I'll try for a bit. That one of the reasons for saying that the NHS can cope is he doesn't want to spread panic, Matt. I mean, maybe that's what he's doing.
Yes, okay, that's fine. He doesn't want to spread panic, but he should take the certain measurement in order to stop the spreading of the virus. I mean, in the school, nobody knows who has got it and who hasn't. And washing hands, it's not practical that you wash your hands every 15 minutes.
So we should stop flights coming in from...
Well, definitely, no doubt about it. I mean, look at Australia. They have done incredibly well. And because 30% business interest to China, even that, they stop all the flights from mainland China, and they have contained really well. I mean, to be honest, it's becoming worrying. And the amount that the way it's spreading at the moment, see every day how it's, increasing. And government is saying that, public health says they're going to give us a steps in every week. Then they're going to say every month because the thing is becoming too much and, it's going out of control.
Matt, you used a word a minute or two back. You said you thought the Prime Minister was negligent. Do you stand by that word?
Of course I do stand by that. He's incredibly negligent. I mean, otherwise he'd have taken a measurement. I mean, we're moving from the containment.
Matt, you've made your point. I've got to move on, but you've made your point and made it very, very forcibly indeed. Going to Paul, a new caller from Croydon. Paul, good evening.
Yeah, good evening. I think this is... there's a lot of fake news going on about this virus.
Right. In what sense?
Sorry?
In which way? Are we underplaying it, overplaying it?
Well, it's creating a bit of fear in a virus that, when you look at the facts, it's no worse than flu. I'm not even a scientific person, so I just look at that and I think, well, there's two sides of it. Okay, it's a virus that's come across another species to us, and it's also extremely viral, but it hasn't got a high mortality rate. It's like no worse than flu.
Right, so should we just...
And we're trying to contain it. So this is an exercise that if you did get a virus that had a high mortality rate and was highly infectious, highly viral, this would be an exercise as what you'd have to do to clamp down. You'd have to do what the Chinese did. You clamp down straight away.
Just lock down.
Everything's got to be locked down. Yeah. If it had a 50% mortality rate, that's what you'd have to do. When Ebola happened, they locked down the whole country. Didn't they? But that wasn't very viral. It was extremely high mortality rate, something like about 70%. It killed nearly everybody. But they locked it down. This thing's escaped into the general populace in most countries now. It's starting to spread. And Johnson's telling us, 80% of us will probably catch it.
Yeah.
But it's flu.
All right, so should we not worry at all, Paul?
If we're trying to carry on this scientific exercise of seeing if we can stop it in its tracks, then you carry on doing what you're doing. But the facts is that this is no worse than flu. It's got a 2% or less mortality rate. Flu is a lot. When we get flu, I'm not sure if I've got my figures right, but I'm old enough to have a flu jab. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
And Paul,
Science has no cure for a virus.
Thousands of people die of flu every year.
That's right.
And at the moment, in the main, your point is right. But of course, there is fear of it mutating. There is fear of it getting worse. Paul, thank you for your point of view. And Paul saying it's just like flu, and yet it feels a little bit different somehow, doesn't it? This is Nigel Farage. It's 6:45. Time for the news headlines with Holly Jones. Government doing enough. Is it right that flights are still coming into London from Tehran, from northern Italy? As Anton says here, it's madness, isn't it? We're still letting people go on holiday skiing in northern Italy. We had that caller, Luca, earlier, who said, look, he'd like to cancel, but he can't get his money back, and he feels very, very trapped. Indeed, I feel a bit sorry for him. Now, John in Market Drayton thinks the government should build a hospital really quickly to deal with the COVID-19 cases, like the Chinese. After all, we're as good as them, aren't we? No, John, we're not. We can't build Crossrail. We can't build HS2. We can't build anything within a decent time frame without it going massively, massively over budget. Look, I really do think. All right, Coda from Basildon says, I don't agree with you, Nigel, on this. We need to have a data-based approach. I'll give you a data-based approach. We have this problem in this country because people came here on aeroplanes from northern Italy. All right, now I do get the point that there are ferries and there's Eurostar. I do understand these things, but clearly air travel, human air travel, is the biggest single risk. And the Australians have acted, and the Americans have acted, and we have done nothing other than say, just keep washing your hands. It'll all be absolutely fine. Ross is a new caller from Redditch. Ross, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, do you agree with me? We should have restricted air travel some time ago.
I do agree with you. Now, the biggest issue we have here is that we have a disease which we're being told for weeks now that might not even have symptoms. So when we're bringing in loads and loads of different people through planes over to this country, from places like northern Italy, from Hong Kong, which you said the planes were still coming in, then we don't have any way to test all these people. And it's the least that we can do. We're literally just crossing our fingers at this point. And on the points that previous callers have made about this potentially being fear-mongering, I feel like we're walking into a different situation where we're taking the opposite side to it. The government aren't putting in enough measures to prevent this. So people aren't taking it seriously enough, and people have heard from so many people.
So you don't think... So the government... I mean, it's not easy for the government. You know, I mean, on the one hand, they don't want to frighten the life out of everybody, but on the other, they don't want us to be too complacent. It's not... I mean, that's not necessarily an easy path to tread, is it?
Well, of course it's not an easy path to tread, but I do feel that we are moving in a direction where lots and lots of people will end up spreading this because they're just not taking it seriously enough. The amount of people that I've spoken to that are talking about how, quote-unquote, just a flu and that it won't affect them that much aren't thinking about the bigger picture. And I feel like the government are trying to take measures to prevent panic, which are just going to end up with more people becoming infected and eventually...
In medical terms, Ross... In medical terms, Ross, at the moment, I don't know how old you are, but you sound like a low-risk group, not a high-risk group. But in medical terms, as it is, without mutating and changing, it is actually just a nasty dose of flu, isn't it?
Well, somewhat, yes. It is a nasty dose of flu, but the issue you have with this is that the flu, in general, is deadly towards vulnerable people. And with something that can spread between even more people and potentially affect 80% of the population, we're just going to end up walking into a situation where the most vulnerable in society are going to suffer because we didn't take the measures that were meant to be taken. And on the point with the Chinese prevention and how they've apparently managed to contain it, I would say not to believe this at all either. I would say the praise that's been given to the Chinese government for the containment is, well, I just don't trust it.
No, and I have to say, they don't appear to be very much in charge. Ross, stay with me. I'm just going to read this out and get your reaction to it. The NHS is now advising anyone who's returned to the UK from Italy and developed symptoms of the coronavirus over the next 14 days to self-isolate and call NHS 111. Once they develop the symptoms, it's too late. They've brought it back with them and spread it, haven't they?
Yeah.
No one's in charge. Ross, no one's in charge, are they?
No. It's worrying me quite a lot. And it's not because I'm going to suffer from it. The individual risk, obviously, is low, but I'm, of course, worrying about the people that I work with. I work in the hospitality industry, so I work in a hotel. So I'm at one of the biggest risks in terms of people coming in. And I work with people who are older. I interact with guests all the time who are in this higher risk category. Now, it's worrying me because while all these protective measures are coming in and, for example, the hotels are getting hand sanitizer and stuff such as that, I just don't think that people are taking it seriously enough.
Okay, Ross, you've made the point and made it very, very clearly, and thank you. I find that hard to believe. The NHS advice is if you come back from Italy and you develop symptoms, self-isolate and call NHS 111. It's too late by then. Let's go to Dartford and speak to Martin. Martin, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. I actually went to Italy on Friday and came back Saturday.
Right.
On a business trip.
Yes.
I deliberated long and hard over whether to go. spoke to suppliers over there, and they said, well, we're not in what they call the red zone, so there is no problem. So I went on a quarter-full plane. You're met by armed police and officials with thermometers when you get there.
Yep.
So even though they know they've got it, they don't want any more of it.
Mm-hmm.
You come back to Gatwick, and as you've said about your own... with Heathrow, there's nothing. Nothing about washing your hands either. But it seems a bit... Boris keeps going on about contain and delay. No one's saying anything about prevent.
No, Martin, I think we should have stopped flights from high-risk cities some time ago. I think we should be checking people. I think we've been very, very remiss. I really do.
Well, I think we should be screening. It's a little bit like saying, well, we're going to get burgled, so we might as well just leave the keys in the front door. But I don't think air travel is the only problem. I mean, I deal a lot with Italy. I'll have a lorry load of stuff arriving next week, which will have come from Turin in a truck with a driver who will probably not have washed his hands very often. He'll have been on the road 3 days, and he'll turn up at my place.
Yeah, no, I get it. Martin, thank you. I get it. Now, look, today's the day, as I say, 3 days on for the press conference, when the Chief Medical Officer, Professor Chris Whitty, told us things have moved on. Let's listen to him one more time.
I would say we've moved from a situation where we were mainly in contain with some delay built in to we're now basically mainly delay, but we're maintaining some
mainly
of the
in the second stage.
Mainly in the second stage at this point in time.
OK, we're mainly now in the second stage at this point in time. That is the Chief Medical Officer. But to reassure the nation, within the last hour, here is the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson.
But the situation is pretty much as it has been, in the sense that we're still, Sam, in the contained phase.
Oh dear. Who is in charge? Clearly, absolutely nobody. The Prime Minister does not appear to know where we are. I will be back with you on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock.
We will make America great again.